Okay, like the last lecture, this one's going to be a little different in that it's not based on chapters from the textbook, but is moving on to something that's a little different. It's a little more hands-on, and something that'll actually lead to your final assignment that I would like you to do for this course. One area that we haven't covered too much is sort of the nuts and bolts of how to actually conduct data analysis, simple data analysis with secondary data. If you folks recall back to earlier in the semester when we talked about one way to conduct research is to use data that's been collected and organized, put together by other people, and then you come along after the fact and use it for your own purposes. What I wanted to do this week is to walk you through exactly an example of how you can do that, to show you some of the simple sorts of data analysis that you can do. This is not a statistics course, so I don't want to get into statistics heavily, but this really has a practical use, what I'm going to show you this week. After I've shown you the steps of how to analyze real data, you could actually put this into a paper that you might need to write in some other course. If you needed to write a paper in another course where you needed to cite some statistics, to give some numbers, to back up whatever it is you're saying, well, this source that I'm going to show you today is a great place to find, basically generate your own statistics, generate your own numbers from a nationally representative sample of adult Americans. So let's get into that. I'm going to walk you through this, and not only I want you to focus on things closely, not only for this assignment that I'm going to give you, but also because I'm going to base the last quiz on the things that we go over in this lecture. It's just going to be, probably won't be that difficult if you're paying close attention to this lecture and you do the assignment. You should be really familiar with this, and the question shouldn't be that difficult. But just remember that this is doubly important, paying attention to this lecture, because you're actually getting sort of tested on it in two ways in terms of a final assignment, a simple one, not too difficult or long, and then also a final quiz. So let's get into the details of this website. This website here, you can see, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that this is a website that is put together by actually the University of California, Berkeley. And I'll put up the description of the assignment in Moodle so you can read that, as well as in addition to this, what I say in this video. But just to know which website you're going to want to use, you could just remember it's pretty simple there at sda.berkeley.edu. Again, I'll put it in Moodle. I'm not expecting you to remember that, but that's how that's the address to get to this interactive website. The name of this website is SDA, which is short for Survey Documentation and Analysis. And what it has here at this website is several data sets, and data sets are what we call sort of the organized data that you have collected and put into and some sort of organized form, whether it be Excel spreadsheets or some other sort of spreadsheet, some sort of statistical software. Once you collect all that and organize it, we call it a data set. So what this website actually has is several data sets of these big national samples put together by professionals who had a lot of money to spend to collect the data, typically calling people on the phone, or in some cases visiting them at their houses and asking them all sorts of interview type questions. If I move down here to the bottom, you can see some of these data sets, these surveys that they have available online here, links to those. The one we'll be using here today is called the General Social Survey, and I'll go to this link here, this top link, which is all of the data from all of the years that they've conducted the survey and collected the data on people's answers. It goes all the way, if you can believe it, back to 1972, every year or two since 1972, they have called up somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 households around the country. It's been very scientifically done, a probability sample, so it's representative of adult Americans all across the country. So 1972, they've been doing surveys every year, or sometimes they skip it and just do nowadays it seems like they do it every 2 years. You can see here that they've got some of these older ones that's up to, this one here is older, up to 2016, the one here 2014, so et cetera, et cetera. So nowadays they're doing it every 2 years. In the earlier days they did it sometimes every year. But it's an enormous amount of data. Tens of thousands of people have answered questions by these interviewers, and their answers have been coded into statistics which are available to the public. This is a free website. As long as you've got internet access, you can go to this website and dig up, find whatever data that you're interested in. So there's some other data files, another name for this. If it's like a file, then you could call it a data file, and it can be called a data set as well. See here, you see it's called data set. There's some other data sets or data files here, like this one that's focusing on elections, national elections. You can see this one here, 2 other congressional elections, so consumer finances, so stuff from the census, etc., racial attitudes and prejudice, lots of different surveys. What I'm going to have you folks do is see me walk through an analysis using general social survey because it's the most applicable to this course, which is filled with sociology and criminology and social work students. And general social survey is really great because they ask a wide variety of questions, not only sort of your background and your demographic characteristics, like your education and age and gender and race and religion and all that basic kind of stuff, but they ask a lot of attitude questions, people's attitudes about various topics, lots of different topics. A lot of it's sort of social issues, even controversial issues, and politics, attitudes towards this, that, and the other. I'll use some examples to give you a flavor of what this data file is like. But what you're going to want to do, first of all, when you do your assignment, is you're going to want to find this website, and then find this link that will get you to the 1972 through 2018 cumulative file. So all the data for all of those years, all put together in one file. So when you click on that link, it's going to take you to, it looks like a dashboard, an interactive page where you can actually do a data analysis. You can actually take their information, their statistics, and have this, with the use of this interface here, with this dashboard, I suppose we could call it, the various tabs to do different things, you can generate the numbers that you're interested in. So you see here that there's lots of different buttons. Over on the left-hand side here, you have all of these folders which have various topics, questions that have been asked of people over the years. So for example, if we were to click on this where it says respondent background, I think the folder where you click on the little folder icons is outside of your picture there, but you'll see here that I just clicked on that, and if you can't see it, don't worry about it. You just click on the little folder icon there, and it opens up into subfolders. And you can see here that we've got your basic background questions, age, gender, race, ethnicity. If we click on that folder, looks like I have to go a little bit outside of that. They've got arrows too, so it opens that up. And here you see descriptions of the exact questions that they ask. So they ask people, how old are you? And so all these folders over here is how you find the specific questions that they ask on this survey over the years. So let's say, for example, that you are interested in age. You can click on that, age, and you'll see it pop up here in this field, variable selection. Remember, variable is the name, is basically the name that we give to, when we're using surveys, to the survey question, an individual question. because people vary in terms of their age. We have people in this survey all the way down to 18, the youngest adults, all the way up to people who were about 90 or so on the high end. And so it's a variable because it varies from person to person to person. So we can, if we're interested in age, what we can do is we can click on this view button right here, and you can see this here. Here you've got your results. It's giving you, this is what is called a frequency table that tells you how many people in this sample are at various ages. And so if you look at these different columns, remember columns are is numbers going up and down, and row would be going across. So if we look at these columns, you can see, let's start with the value right here. This is the value that's given to each person who answered this question. So if somebody, you know, an interviewer is talking to you on the phone, they say, how old are you? And you say 18, then you get this score, 18, recorded for you. You're going to be one case out of thousands of cases, and this 18 is going to be recorded for you. Now what that means is obviously that you're 18 years old. So you can see here that the age of the people in these surveys goes all the way from 18 at the youngest. They don't interview kids, only grown-ups. So they start with 18-year-olds, and it goes all the way up to the highest level, where once you get to be 89 or older, they just give you the number 89. That's it. You could be 95 years old, they give you an 85. Sometimes they'll cut it off like that. Once the numbers get really high, they'll say, okay, we're going to cut it off there, and anybody higher than that, we'll give them the same number. So that's how come you can see that the number, well, your number here is there's 364 people in all these surveys that are all put together. There's a whole bunch of them. 364 people who were that old were interviewed, and you can see that's a lot more than people who were 88. Here's the people who are 88 years old, and there was 121 of them who've been interviewed. So you say, well, how come there's so many more people who are 89 than there are 88? 3 times as many people almost. And the reason for that is just that people who are 90, 91, 92 years old, they all get lumped into this category of 89, because think of it like a ceiling. It's a cutoff. Now you may be, if you're paying attention, you're saying, well, what about this 98 and 99? Usually when people put these data sets together, they need to have a code, a number that indicates a don't know answer. And so there was one person in this sample who said, I don't know how old I am, which is kind of strange, but you can get all sorts of crazy answers when you're talking to people in these surveys. So they got scored a 98, but the 98 doesn't mean you're 98 years old. What that means is 98 means we don't know what their age is, and you have to put numbers in the computer. The computer generally, it doesn't make sense out of words like DK. It's not going to know what DK is. So you put in 98 as a symbol, meaning we don't know. The person wouldn't tell us. They didn't know how old they were, and there was one person who indicated they didn't know. And then you see there's 227 people who, for some reason, they didn't get their information. It's not available. And so for the people who you didn't get that information on age from them, they get a 99. So 99 doesn't mean you're 99 years old. It means we didn't get the information. So they call these 98s and these 99s here, they call those missing values, because you didn't get a valid answer from people on that. You don't know their age. And so you put either a 98 if they say they didn't know their age, or you put a 99 if you just didn't get it for some reason, if you forgot to ask, or something screwy, I don't know, something weird happened and you lost that information, then you just put a 99 in there for that person, meaning, well, we didn't get the information for them. That's called, again, those are called missing values, because they're not valid. They mean something went wrong. Okay, so again, these are the values going from 99 all the way down to 18. Those are the values. That's the number that you get assigned one of these numbers depending on how old you are. The N here refers to, well, how many people got in that age category were part of the sample. And you can see here that there was 241 people in this sample who are 18 years of age. there was 861 people who were 19 years of age. There was 885 people who were 20 years of age, and on and on and on. And you might say, well, look, it's kind of getting bigger with each year. Well, it's possible that they might have had better luck tracking down people a little bit older to take the time to do an interview. Maybe it's kind of hard to get college students or teenagers to locate them. Whatever the reason, there's smaller numbers, especially for these 18-year-olds. So, but that's what this N means. N means sample size, the number of the sample. But here it's for each age. That's what these numbers are. And if you add them up for all of the age levels, for each age, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, you see that there were 64,814 people who are part of this sample. And it's all the different, it's only 1 or 2,000 people per year over the past, almost 50 years. But 1 to 2,000 people, and they're all added up. They're all blended into this one mega sample, this one super sample, 64,000, almost 65,000 people. So that's what that means. This is your sample size. This is your capital N, meaning your total sample size is 64,000. And that's a big sample. We talked this semester about, hey, if you're doing quantitative research and you can get 500 people, that's pretty good. Well, this is fabulous. This is fantastic when you have a sample of 64,000. That's fantastic. The only thing that's kind of bad about it in this situation is that some of this data, some of these answers are 50 years old almost. People were asked how old they were back in 1972, and they've all been lumped in with everybody else. So that's a problem, or could be a problem with this data set, is it's got a lot of old answers along with people who 2018 is the most recent survey that they have data on here. 2020, I don't know what they're doing for that with the pandemic and everything. Maybe they're still doing it. But if they have done it for 2020, it hasn't gotten added in with the rest of this data yet. So 2018 is the newest data that you have. Now, the final thing I'll say from this list, from this table, I should say, the frequency table, is here we have, by the way, these numbers you can think of as the frequency. What's the frequency of 18-year-olds? Well, there's 241 of them in this sample. What's the frequency of 19-year-olds? Well, there's 861 of them. So frequency, these are often called frequency tables because they're referring to, well, how many people are there at each age, at each level. But also, we typically list percentages because a lot of times percentages are more useful because you look at these big numbers, raw numbers like this, and it's sometimes not quite as common sense or intuitive as percentages. Because if you look at percentages, this tells you that 0.4% of the entire sample is made up of 18-year-olds. 1.3% of the sample is 19-year-olds. 1.4% of the sample is 20-year-olds, and on and on and on. And if you look down here, you could say, well, I wonder which is the biggest group. What age has the most? And so I don't know. But if you look down here, it looks like it gets smaller as you get older. It peaks here a little bit earlier. So probably it looks to me like there's a couple of them that are tied. Wherever you see a 2.2 is about as high as you get. So those are going to be your biggest age groups are going to be 2.2% of the entire sample, right? And so that's the percent distribution. This is the percent distribution as opposed to the frequency distribution. And a lot of times the percent is actually more useful. Most of the time it's more useful because it tells you, well, what are the most popular categories of this data that I'm looking at? What's the most popular, the age that has the most people at that particular age? And you look in here and you say, well, most of them, where they're 2.2, they're like in their 20s, 27 here, 28, 30, 32, 34. So basically late 20s, early 30s seems to be where you get the most people, right? So anyway, that's what a frequency distribution table looks like. It's often called frequency distribution table. And the reason why they use distribution is it tells you how spread out the people are in terms of their age. And you can see that they're all the way from teenagers all the way to senior citizens to quite advanced ages. So that is how you look at the variable of age to see where most people are on age. Is to look at, just do like a go back to where we were. You put the variable. This is called the variable name. The variable name that's given to this question is age. It's the text of the question. If we pull that up again, I think it'll say down at the bottom. Well, it doesn't say it for this one because age is kind of obvious. But a lot of times they'll actually put the wording of the question down below, and you can read exactly what they asked the person. I think for these really simple ones, they probably don't do that. I'm not sure if the Hispanic one, if they asked about that or not either, where you can read what the exact question is. So a lot of times they'll tell you exactly what they ask. So to the word for word, the text that they read to the people that they're interviewing. So R stands for respondent. So if the respondent is female, read Latina. If male, read Latino. So are you Spanish, Hispanic, or Latino/Latina? If yes, which group are you from? This is an example of a question where they give you the exact wording of the question, what the interviewer asked over the phone or in person, if it's in-person interview. And then so they ask them what's your group. If you're Hispanic, what's your group? And then the country that your family is from. Not Hispanic, that's most folks not Hispanic, but then if you are Hispanic, then whether you're Mexican, your ancestry is Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, etc. So the reason why I bring up this Hispanic one is just because it's an example where they actually tell you word for word what their question was. So you know exactly what they're asking, right? Sometimes that's really important to know exactly what they're asking. Okay, so what I just went through was to show you how to look at the results for one specific question that you chose. And we did age first of all, and now we just looked at Hispanic. I suppose we can pull that back up for a second just to show you it's the same sort of thing. So this tells you the number of people in each one of these categories. And as I said before, the most common answer is most Americans are not Hispanic, and so most of them go right there. But you see that as you go down from there, you've got lots of different Hispanic groups, and it looks like having a Mexican background is most common, most popular, because there's 885 people in this sample who have a Mexican ancestry. And then it's significantly smaller if you're asking for the people who say that they're Puerto Rican background or Cuban, much smaller than the Mexican American group. And then on and on and on, even smaller with these other groups, right? And then it looks like there's been a lot of people. I think in the early days, they didn't ask this question. So there's a lot of people who didn't get asked this question at all, and they end up in that category. Because I think it's only been the past 15 or 20 years they've been asking about if you're Hispanic or not. So anyway, part of your assignment is going to be I'm going to give you some guidance on this, but I'm going to want you to pick two variables, two questions that you're going to do what I just did and analyze, and I'll give you the specifics on that later. But you'll see where I'm going with this. But I'm going to want you to pick two variables, and I'll help you show you how to pick those variables. I'll make it easy for you and just give you a handful of choices, so it's not overwhelming, because not everybody's super techy and comfortable with all this data analysis stuff. So anyway, I'm going to take a break, and we'll continue on with this lecture in part 2.